All right. Welcome. Today is Friday, the 17th. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's the 17th of September already. This is our second week hosting our Friday social hours as part of the first year experience. And I am delighted to welcome our guest today. Our guest is Dr. John Tanacredi. John is from biology, chemistry, and environmental sciences. He is also the director of CIRCOM, which is out in Seaville. And John has a pretty extensive research background, and I am delighted to have had the chance to work with him as a colleague now for a number of years. And today he's going to talk to us. And unfortunately, I think if we were face to face, we might have gotten some horseshoe crabs today. He loves to bring his horseshoe crabs to campus. But today he is going to talk to us about our coastal oceans under siege, myths and facts regarding the richness of Long Island coastal natural resources. So a very pressing time, I think, to hear some of this information. So thank you, Dr. Tanacredi, for joining us today. Our first year students, as well as our entire campus community, is really thankful to have you as a guest.
Thank you, Noelle. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This picture that you see here, it really, in some respects, has two aspects about coastlines. One, they're pretty tumultuous. They're active. They're vibrant. And then there are coastlines that are not so. But most of the natural resources of Long Island are geared toward coastal environments. In spite of the pandemic, historically, every man, woman, and child in the United States has spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 days a year in some type of coastal environmental aspect, whether it's just visiting the coast, walking along the coastline. There's been tons of reports, all types of reports, because of their productivity. These are very special places, coastlines. They're probably the most productive ecological places on the earth. They're even more productive than agriculturally subsidized agricultural sites or coral reefs, or even tropical rainforests don't have as much what we call biomass productivity, which is really important for food resources and fisheries. And then the whole idea of the largest growing entrepreneurial aspect in the world is recreation, the idea of free time, more and more time to recreate. But this is really the key to our coastal, why these coastlines are under siege, and why there's quite a bit of misinformation, possibly, maybe even mythological, and to some extent, ideas about what goes on the coastline and what influences they will have. This is a chart that talks to the concentration, human populations, and most of them are along coastlines. Coastlines, mouths of waterways, have historically been the centers of civilizations. The cities, towns, and communities all started in some kind of place close to a freshwater source for drinking purposes. They receive our waste. They provide our food resources, not necessarily at the same time. But the whole idea of these areas of coastlines and water bodies is where most people live. As noted here, 80% of the US population lives within an hour's drive of the coastline. And yet, within all of that area, less than 1/3 of the original types of natural systems, which we call estuaries or ecosystems along the coast, remain in the continental United States today. And it's important because these are constantly pressured by more and more people. The population along the east coast of the United States has tripled in the last 50 years. So the pressures from more and more people are constantly there. But that doesn't mean there's a lack of attention. More and more issues are associated with the coastline, and all types of reports, looking at their complexity, looking at their dynamics, everything from the physics of eroding shorelines to the atmospheric chemistry and physics associated with the precipitation events. They've been the subject of quite a bit of joke lines in the very beginning. You have to have a sense of humor when you're dealing with the numbers and kind of concerns that are associated with them. But in the long run, it's the continuous monitoring, and that's what we do at CIRCOM. That's the M in CIRCOM, is monitoring these resources. It's basically like going to your doctor. You take certain types of tests in determining your health. your temperature, any of the chemical analyses, your respiration, your heart rate, and endless amounts of things that determine your health. It's the same type of thing that happens in a ecological system. We look for the health of the systems, the pH, dissolved oxygen, the amount of contaminant levels. These things are done all the time. There's a big program that's become international called Muscle Watch. It takes a look at a single type of species of invertebrate that is very good at accumulating contaminants, and you just monitor them, and it's an annual thing. It's been going on for over 25 years. It's done by the US EPA. All types of agencies, federal, state, EPA, DEC, even places like the New York Academy of Sciences, which has a big program dealing with monitoring industrial inputs, things like PCBs. You read about these contaminants, you hear about them periodically, but these are ongoing, constant evaluations and assessments as to whether or not they're increasing, decreasing, and what their implications are in the estuary. I was involved with the Academy for 10 years, a program where it was called Industrial Ecology, and we looked at we had all these reports, and it all started ancient times ago, back in the 1920s and the 1950s, in the development of an airport, JFK, and then it became important because in New York Harbor, for example, which includes Brooklyn and Queens, which is part of Long Island, it is Jamaica Bay, and we looked at with Barry Commoner, who's iconic conservation biologist that you may learn about as you go through your undergraduate studies and learn about conservation ecology in general. And it was work that was done by a host of scientists that brought together in a team that looked at Jamaica Bay as an important place. We kind of call it the paradigm for coastal environments as to relationship to everything from landfill contamination, numbers of people, all of the housing along the shoreline, an airport, an international airport. And yet it's a wildlife refuge where 345 different species of birds migrate through or live within the refuge itself. There's 50 species of fish, all types of invertebrates. It's a dynamic ecosystem. And so there's a lot of things associated with a stress on an environment. And yet in most stressful environments are exactly what these ecosystems need in order to increase their diversity. There's a list of finfish that are found just in Jamaica Bay alone. It's one of the highest areas for winter flounder. If anybody does any fishing or any of their families, you go fishing, bluefish, striped bass, and winter flounder are the key, but it's the numbers and types of species that are important. The number of birds, again, as many of these are what they call obligates. They're found only in marshes. They're found only in terrestrial portions of the bay. If you work in the scientific disciplines, you're always looking at taking some kind of change that you want to look at. This has to do with the amount of the tidal exchange. We're on an island, and therefore every time there's the seasons change or the lunar cycle changes every day, every 6 hours, it's called semi-diurnal. We have a high tide and a low tide. Those tidal influences influence all of the coastal environments that people come to recreate in, come to fish in, come to visit and just relax in. So CIRCOM, as a monitoring site, inventorying is very important. The inventorying is what scientists do. They make observations, they record things. So it depends on what you collect. You can collect baseball cards, or you can collect stamps, or you can collect whatever at this point. The idea of the collectibles and data becomes the foundation for interpreting that health again. It's what the doctors do when you're looking at public health or human health. It's the same thing that we do in ecosystems. So inventorying is critically important. And so these are some reports that were developed. Right now, we have 2 students working on an inventory for phytoplankton in Great South Bay, right out here. I'm zooming in from Long Island. We also look at horseshoe crabs. Just a few notes on that, because that's our primary focus at CIRCOM. These sites, 115 locations each summer. We just finished them we visit each of these sites during the key times that the horseshoe crabs come ashore. Horseshoe crabs have been on Earth for 445 million years, give or take a week or two. And in that time period, they have literally consistently come back onto the shoreline to reproduce each year. Why is that important? These are paleo survivors. Not only have they been on Earth that long, but their blood right now has become even more prime importance associated with the pandemic. Their blood, which is basically blue-based, blue color, it's based on copper, not iron like our blood. When it hits the air, it turns blue. Is an extract from there called LAL, Limulus amoebocyte lysate. And that is what is called an endotoxin detecting system. You can tell if there's bacteria. You'll learn in Bio 1 and 2 about gram-negative, gram-positive bacteria and microorganisms. But the key is gram-negative bacteria is very, very dangerous. It reduces sepsis. So you don't want to go into a hospital and get sick from that. And it's basically a bacterial infection that you really don't have any way around treating that. So you have to detect to make sure there's no contamination. It's the LAL from horseshoe crab blood that does that. So there's a functioning importance to our own health, is the idea of that all of those billions of pandemic inoculations have all been tested to some extent in batch sampling to make sure that they're not contaminated. Also, the horseshoe crabs produce between the females produce between 80 and 120 eggs per season. And these are nested in all of these sites that you see here. And when they come ashore, and these eggs become food for migratory birds. And right now, we're moving closer and closer to the fall season, and birds are migrating out. Millions of birds are migrating down south as far away as Terra del Fuego in southern Argentina. And those birds, like red knots and ruddy turnstones, feed along the coastline from Maine to Florida on horseshoe crab eggs, because they're only found on the east sides of the continents of the world. There are only 4 species of horseshoe crabs on the planet. And this horseshoe crab area, Limulus polyphemus, is basically found in these sites. But there are problems associated with it. And that's where the myth comes along. The idea that they're thought to be fairly healthy. There might be some little problems here, and they're kind of exotic as they come ashore. Because they have a little telson, they don't stab you at all. They use that to turn themselves over in the water. But these 2 charts here are critical. We've been monitoring for over 20 years these sites, and we're finding that each year, less and less and less horseshoe crabs are coming ashore. That means less and less bird eggs available for migratory, and it's being impacted. Already, ruddy turnstones have been placed, and red knots, rather, have been placed on the endangered species list because they're not getting the food resources that they need before they migrate down to South America. Now, what is contributing to that? Several things. One, they're harvested in New York State for bait, and that's a really big problem. You can't conserve something if you wind up taking it out of the population and you just chop it up and put it in a refrigerator and use it for bait for conch and eel, which is an international fisheries, which is not a big fisheries in the United States, but that's what they're being used for mostly. In the whole east coast of the United States, over 600,000 horseshoe crabs are removed from the population. Now, there are another group, over 500,000 animals that are taken out to bleed to make that LAL, but they're all put back into the environment, and the impact on those animals are practically nothing. But here's the key. This little chart to the left here, trends in the number of sites. The numbers of habitats, the place that they live, are declining at about an 8% rate. That can be cataclysmic long-term, and that's why we monitor them all along. But over the last decade, the numbers of sites that continue to produce and have breeding sites have been reduced. We also have concerns a little bit about water quality. Is it unbelievable? In the pandemic, the last 3 summers, in 2019, 20, and 21, this past year, the water quality in Great South Bay, right out here at our field station, has been unbelievable. And all the students who are doing their internships here are saying the same type of thing. The water quality is dramatically improving. However, there are subtle little changes, and that's why you have to do monitoring, and this is pH. When you take your chemistry courses, you'll learn about pH and chemical reactions and how they can be really important in the overall, again, health of the estuary. And we're finding that it's getting more acidic in the ocean. Acidification is the big issue globally, and Great South Bay has been shown to do that. Just real quick through the governmental interactions, we have a relationship on estuaries, but data is sometimes the tough thing about monitoring data. You will learn this no matter what your career path is. Data needs to be retrieved periodically to find out trends in the change in that data. Our data was used many years back in 2004, 2008 to come up with a program dealing with at Fire Island National Seashore about discharge of what they call boat waste rather than bringing to a clean out station, pump stations. And we actually helped in producing a law that's in Suffolk County saying that you can't short dump anything into the coastline. And so the idea of the coastline being a repository of waste, it also needs to be monitored so that you can prevent that waste from going in and finding ways to treat it. So our data was pretty important in that, and it was printed up in local news. We also had some draft working on protecting wetlands. We were looking at the idea of, this has to do with nitrogen concerns. On Long Island, there's issues with septic systems, but the really important portion for us at CERCOM and dealing with monitoring for horseshoe crabs is to make sure that their habitat is protected. And we've already had a few towns that have identified breeding beaches, and therefore horseshoe crabs cannot be collected from those areas. And we're really trying to work with the state. We haven't convinced them yet. It's been a 5-year journey to say that we shouldn't be taking for bait. Bait is they can have artificial baits, and that's what should be done. But that's really what we're working on at this point. So I just wanted that's the kind of the monitoring portion. But this is the key to this presentation here for if you're just starting your college career. The idea of Long Island's coastal environment, once you get to know it, once you get to study it, and once you get to observe what's going on there, it's fascinating. I've been to a few places in my career around the world, and yet to this day, nothing gets me more excited than to watch humpback whales breaching under the Verrazano Bridge, or watching white sharks in Long Island Sound, or looking at bald eagles and kestrels and all types of birds of prey, or dolphins, hundreds and hundreds of dolphins off into the Peconic Bay. So, and that's just the large mammals. We're not even talking about the smaller invertebrates and the diversity of fin fisheries and phytoplankton, and just the whole idea of appreciating the coastline. So the coastlines and the near shore, the connection between terrestrial environments and the aquatic environments and the ocean environments is a very special place in ecology. They're called ecotones, places of transition. And in many respects, that's kind of a prescription for life. Life is generally a transition, learning new things, exploring new areas, and having an opportunity to see how nature really functions, not necessarily reading about it or hearing some professor talk about it. It's the idea of actually being in the field and partaking in it. So let's just end with the idea of a perspective. Always keep the perspective positive. Always make sure that you share your experiences and discuss things. It's a good idea to be communicative. And as you're starting out your college time, not only with your colleagues and your students and your professors, but all types of connections. And when you're at Malloy, there are several areas that are just prime. They're not as fantastic in the big picture of things long term, but they're amazing in the development of your own beginnings of your career. International travel is a big part of that. Not many schools have programs, but nothing like I've seen at Malloy. Of course, things are on hold a little bit with the pandemic, but that will be resolved. I'm pretty confident, and but I think you'll always have an opportunity to explore the world, explore the resources, and you can start at Malloy certainly in coastal issues, not only at CERCOM but in the BCES department, which is a great way to get the beginnings of any knowledge base that you have in science. So I hope that was okay. I don't know how much time did I go there. I could add some more things if you need to, Noelle.
No, that's great. I always like to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I know we have a lot of students. Thank you for joining us today. Would anyone like to ask a question to Dr. Tanacredi? Maybe about some of his work, maybe about research opportunities? You can unmute. You don't have to turn your cameras on, but feel free to unmute and just ask.
Dr. Tanacredi, for the freshmen on the Zoom meeting, can you tell us where CERTCOM is located?
Sure. We are in West Sayville in Suffolk County. We're right at our backyard is, I'm talking to you from Great South Bay on Long Island. And we're in the West Sayville Boat Basin, which is a marina out here, and which we use the resources of the marina quite a bit. And we have an aquaculture laboratory, which captively breeds horseshoe crabs. We're the only captive breeding horseshoe crab laboratory in the Western Hemisphere. There is one in Hong Kong University, City University, Hong Kong, captive breeds horseshoe crabs. They work on the other 3 species. We only work with the one that's found in North America, Limulus. But we're right here. We have about 3,500 square feet of lab office space. And we have resources, students who do their field research or can do an internship here. We've had students from just about every school. We've had nurses who are certainly interested in LAL because they experience that in every hospital. And we've had criminal justice, we've had business students. So there's no restriction on doing internships here because it's basically getting a hands-on experience. That's the key to, and that's what employers look at. They determine what types of day-to-day operations you've been involved in. And it's the same old catch-22, as they say. You can't get the experience unless you have the job, and you can't have the job unless you get the experience. So here, what we do in field activities, field data collection and field exercises, you would not, as a student, actually get involved with something like that until you're in possibly graduate school or possibly on the big universities as you come close to your senior year. Here, you can start as a freshman. You can do intern experiences. You can. We have volunteers here as well, working on our phytoplankton work, working on some other aspects of our monitoring program. Again, the monitoring program is the main portion of what this field station does, but it also supports, as a professor in BCES department, I have all students that are in the Earth and Environmental Science program or any program, almost a requirement to come and do internship here. We also have a network of cooperators. There are 28 individual groups, the American Museum of Natural History, the National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and there's a host of others. You can get our brochure and our flyers, and it'll tell you all about intern experiences. Those have been impacted by the pandemic. They've been reduced a bit, but we still keep working as things start to open up. We've had at least 5 students doing work at the American Museum of Natural History. It was a really fantastic experience there. So it's the collaborations, it's the beginning of your network in your career path, and we're out here in West Sayville, Long Island.
And Dr. Tanacredi, if you are a freshman and you are interested in exploring, and getting into CERTCOM, do you have office hours here on campus that the freshmen can go and speak with you?
Sure. Yeah. Actually,
what's your room number?
I'm in Kellenberg 101, and back in the corner. And I would suggest just email me and, say hi and tell me when you're available. I'm usually there I'm usually here 2 days a week, and generally in the past, if it's not an online lecture or talk or anything like that, it would be at Rockville Center on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. But that varies from week to week. It depends on, again, like today and next Friday, we'll be in the field. We'll be out on a boat cruise out here, out to Fire Island, and doing some work for the ecology class. But just email me, indicate that you're interested. Give me the student schedule more than my schedule. Let me know, because you can even visit if you wanted to come by CERCOM just to take a quick tour. You can talk to my tech, Kyle Morelli, who's runs the shop. He takes care of the lab. We have living systems here, and so that wouldn't be a problem. But have a student could just email me and we can work out a time.
That's great. Does any of our students have any questions?
I could add one other thing. We will have, and this is through the department. So certainly Dr. Cutter as the coordinator for the first year experience, I'm sure she has and she will share. We have an Earth Day celebration in April. This year, it's going to be a little different from all the others. We're starting to, it'll be through our senior seminar program with the students. We'll be responsible for putting on a colloquium for that day, upward of 5 speakers on Long Island's Eco Summit, where we are on a host of issues. And we're just starting the planning process here. And then once I teach the senior seminar class starting up in February, they'll be responsible for putting this conference on. It'll be the first one at Malloy. We've done them years ago at another college, and they're very successful. And we can do this virtually, so it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone needs to be there, but that's what we're looking at for April for Earth Day in 2022.
And that's great. And Dr. Tanacredi, I see his email is in the chat. So students, if you're interested in any of the internships or the Earth Day or anything that Dr. Tanacredi mentioned today, or even just to find out more information about how you can get involved either on campus here at Malloy or at our offsite at CERCOM, we would be happy to connect you. And Dr. Tanacredi's email is in the chat. So you just have to open up the chat. I was thinking today that since this is different than last year, a lot of you first year students maybe have never been on these Zoom calls. So maybe the technology is a little bit new. So you'll find the chat. It should be on the bottom of your screen if you pull it up. But of course, you can always reach out to myself or Deb in the first year experience, and we can connect you as well. I know some of our first year students are a little bit shy, but is there any questions, anything before we wrap up?
When's the first date again?
The first day for what, Moses?
The first date for to sign up.
What are you interested in signing up for?
Probably one of the trips.
The problem is that my client is for
The international trips?
Oh, the international trips, maybe.
Yeah.
So you have to be you had to have completed a full year at Malloy before you become eligible for international education. But they run throughout the year, usually during the winter break. So between the December and January winter intersession. And then there's usually a few that run over spring break. So that's usually about the middle of March. And then at the end of the year, we have a number of trips that go mid-May through June, I believe. I don't know if they run anything specifically in July and August, but then there's also the chance to study abroad. And so that would be an entire semester where you're studying in an international location. We also have service trips, which are domestic trips. So in addition to going abroad or going international, there's also chances to travel domestic with any of our service trips. So that'll stay within the continental United States as well as Puerto Rico for travel with our service program. But you do, in order to become eligible, you do have to complete a full year, 2 semesters at Malloy before you're eligible. So the first year students are eligible is in May. So you can start looking at trips in May.
All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Dr. Tanacredi and I took a group of students to the Galapagos. I know I talked to,
Ooh. Oh
yeah, I
yeah.
talked to the bio students about that the other day. So maybe on the cards in the future when things are not as crazy in the world, but
Absolutely.
are there any additional questions? I do want to make sure that students put their emails in the chat. Deb, do we want to do a giveaway now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
I'd like to ask Dr. T if he could pick a number from 1 through 13.
Okay. 7.
Very good. The winner is T. Shandone. And if Dr. Cutter can pick another number, 1 through 13,
6.
that's at S. Negrino. And
Sophia Negrino, yep, I see. And is it Tahira?
yes, yeah.
Tahira, all right. Is
And
Sophia
also-
still on the call? Sorry.
One more number, Dr.
Oh.
T, 1 through 13.
Need another from me.
Yes,
13.
that's M. Musa. M is another winner. So we have 3 winners today. You'll be getting a notification from the first year experience. And I'll send an email out and let the winners know that when they can come in and pick up their swag.
All right,
If I
thank
could,
you. Yes,
I add one other thing. If any student can send to me or to to Regina at CERCOM their email address, and we'll put them on our newsletter mailing list, which is basically we do hard copies, but we can send it out in an email. We also put it on our website. So if you have any interest in the sciences, if that's what your major is, it doesn't really matter what your major is, take a look at CERCOM on our website, and I think you'll see some of the international travel activities, Easter Island, Sicily, Bermuda. These are just the beginnings. Actually, things were really moving along there. As Dr. Cutter mentioned, we got Galapagos in just under the travel restrictions. So, but these will be coming back. There's no doubt about that.
yeah, absolutely. And we do have all the email addresses, so we can share them with Regina as well. So,
Great.
So thank you once again, Dr. Tanacredi, for joining us today. You always are a wealth of knowledge and information to share with us. And we look forward to having all of our students join us again next week on Friday, every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. During the fall semester. Thank you.